Hello. This is going to be a video about the basics of drum programming. This will apply not just to the MPCs, although obviously I'm using an MPC X here, but any drum machine that you're using 16 steps per sequence, which is actually the vast majority of them. Going back quite a long time, my very first drum machine in the late 70s, early 80s had 16 steps. You could change it to 8, but it had 16 steps as a maximum. So I'll go on to the step sequencer screen. There's actually another step sequencer screen as well, where you can only do one button at a time, or one pad at a time, which is one sound. On here, at the left-hand side, I don't know how clear it'll be on the video, but basically I've got A1 at the bottom and A16 at the top. So I've got all 16 sounds available, and I can see their tracks going across the screen. A lot of dedicated drum machines, you can only look at one track at a time, and I'll do a brief bit at the end about the one track at a time step sequencer that the MPCs now have. But this is going to be more about the the actual going around programming a drum machine, and it's going to assume no knowledge at all. So what 16 steps gives you is, in a typical 4/4 bar, which is what 99% of Western music is, especially pop music and rock and so on. You've got the pale lines might not show, but you're basically talking, the 4 is 4 beats to the bar, 4 beats to the measure, or whatever you want to call it. And that's what these pale lines are. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 16 steps means you've got 4 bits available in each beat. And obviously, if you're off the beat, if you don't put it on the first beat of the first step of each beat of the bar, you'll lose your timing. So if we do, this is the first step of the bit. The first beat of the bar is always the downbeat. So this is literally just a downbeat. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do that. I'm sorry, I've got 2 bars there. I'm going to get rid of 1 bar just to make life easier. There we go. We're just dealing with 1 bar now. Sorry. So we've got so that's literally just having a kick drum or bass drum on the downbeat. If you want what becomes 2 in a 4/4 bar, so you'd put it on step 1 and step 9, because step 9 is the halfway point through your 16 steps. We'll talk more about going off the beat once we've got over the basics. And then if anybody talks to you about 4 to the floor or 4/4 time, well, 4/4 bass drum, this is what a 4/4 bass drum is. So you've got one every beat of the bar. Now 2/4, where you only have 2 beats in the bar. I'm sorry, I will stop that while I'm talking. 2/4, and if you had 2/4 time, there would only be 2 steps in the bar, and if you still had a bass drum on each step, it'd sound the same. The number of beats in a bar really matters more about musical notation, about what you actually do on your sequencer. I quite often do 6/4 time, where I've got 6 beats in a bar, because that fits in with what I've programmed on a analog sequencer. The pattern I've got doesn't fit 4/4 time, so I will do something different. But it doesn't mean it can't have the same feel to a large degree as 4/4. 4/4 is the most regimented, but there are other options. But time signatures are a thing for another time. You will be dealing with 4/4 time in 99% of the occasions, but it's just being aware that it doesn't mean you can't do other things. So we don't want the 4/4 bass drum. So I'm calling it 2/4. It won't be musically correct, but calling it 2/4. So we're up on the stair now. So on your drum machine, that would be step 5 and step 13. That's what beat second beat of the bar is and the fourth beat of the bar is. You'll soon learn this once you do a bit of programming. And you can, that's very simple, basic, and you could actually record quite a lot of music around that, and there is quite a lot of dance music out there or not dance, pop music out there that's like that. Most dance music has 4/4 bass drum. And if you put a kick drum underneath it, you can, it just changes the feel of it. And this is something to bear in mind. This is something to bear in mind with your programming. If you're playing it live, obviously you can knock sounds in and out, so you could pop that on and take it off again. Or you could just play it manually. Horrors. Excuse me. Or if you've got a song mode on your drum machine, you could obviously just do these slight variations. But one of the things I always feel is that, you can do all the subtleties you like in the studio. When somebody listens to your song, they're not going to like your song because you've done that little twiddly bit on the percussion, 15 bars in or whatever. It's going to be the overall structure of the song, the way it feels, and the melody and so on. Whether or not you've done some more interesting drums or something is really for you and possibly fellow musicians to notice and be interested in. But it's horses for courses. If it's something you feel you need to do it. It's your music. Right. Before I go off on another one. So that's the very basics. You're dealing with step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. And if you stay on there, you'll sound quite regimented. And that's fine if that's what you sound like. You can start putting little variations. That's one of my favourite drum patterns, actually. I have to stop myself from using that one too much. So what I've done there is I've gone to the offbeat. So step 5 would be step 5 on your 16-step drum machine. So step 7 would be the offbeat. And the offbeat's quite often where things like the chord stabs are on reggae music, what's called the shank. They're on the offbeat, and that's what gives the music a lot of its feel. I mean, you can tell how much it changed. Now you see, there's a good example. I got it slightly off there, but it doesn't sound wrong. It just sounds different. And this again is for you to, what you want your piece of music to sound like, what you want it to feel like, and so on. So that was on step 9. That was on step 10. So I put it back on step 11. So now I'm back on the offbeat. So just doing those few things around there, and this is before you start messing with volumes and things. I mean, you start messing with volumes and it makes a big difference. Or it can make a big difference, I should say. Most drum machines will let you mess with volumes relatively easily. I mean, the main one I use outside the MPCs is the Beat Step Pro, and when you've got the knobs right there, and you can mess with each step individually. That's a brilliant piece of kit. So that's not done anything complicated at all, and I've not introduced anything else other than kick drum and snare drum. So, and if you keep the kick drum on 1, 5, 9 and 13, you know, beat 1, beat 2, beat 3 and beat 4, you can't really go wrong with anything else. I'm sure there'll be people that argue with me, but you can't. You know, that's giving you basic timing. So if you put something random, the core timing is still there. It might not sound very good, but but the core timing is still there. So so feel free to play around is really what I'm driving at. What I would suggest is that you leave the bass drum and possibly the snare. The snare, because the snare is so important in Western music or pop music, taking that off the beat can sound quite odd. On the offbeat, it's fine. You see, like I've done there. And there's no major problem, but if you do it, yeah. Now you notice that's an interesting feel, and I find it's better if you turn the volume down a bit. And that is very similar to what they call a ghost hit by a real live drummer, whatever you want to call them. An actual drummer does a lot of things like ghost hits, and we're not going to start talking about paradiddles and all the other things they get up to. But this is a little tip. If you kick it, put it, so you've got your regular snare. So it just adds a bit more feel straight off the bat. If you take it away. Oh, hang on, I missed. I personally prefer it with the volume down. You might like it with that. And then, obviously, there's introducing the snare flan every now and again. Now you notice there what I did. I've left what was the ghost hit in, but what I've done is I've made the first hit quieter, because again this emulates a real drummer. I'm not trying to be like a real drummer at all, but it emulates what a real drummer does. They can't hit as hard the first time because they're going to lift the stick quickly and hit the same drum again. They could do it with 2 sticks, but this is what actually happens. So having that first hit less volume actually just sounds a bit less mechanical. But again, it's a subtlety, but it's something I pay attention to in my music because I'm bothered about it, basically. And again, you do what's appropriate for you in your music. So I'm just getting rid of that. Right. So again, just then feel free to, for your heart's content, to mess around putting other stuff in. I can't remember what else I've got on this kit. Well, there we go. The hi-hat's really probably the next most important for pop music and probably dance music as well. And a lot of the time it's 16ths. I'm going to do this the slow way. I mean, I actually find it easier to play them in. Whoops. I find it easier to play them in myself, actually. And again, this is where you'll add a bit of interest. You can just about hear it under the snare flam. I actually think, personally, I sometimes even miss hi-hat off completely. And if I'm feeling that's a bit loud, again, all drum machines will do this. Yeah, I can just adjust the volume. So, I'll be amazed if you can't change the volume on your drum machine to adjust it how you want, or change the mix if you like. But again, one of the things to be aware of, particularly with the hi-hat, is it makes a real difference what bass sound is being used and obviously the rest of the music that's playing around it. It's interesting how in my experience, the hi-hat is the first one that seems to disappear in the mix. And I'd quite often turn the snare drum down because that rarely disappears from the mix. And I'd sometimes make myself write a piece of music without a snare drum at all. So I'm going to stop it for a second, give me throat a rest. I sometimes write a song without a snare drum at all, because just to do something different. And particularly if I've got a melody line I really like, I actually feel like sometimes the snare interferes with the melody. But it all depends on your taste, and the mix makes a big difference, and even the amount of reverb, which is not within the remit of this video, but it's so don't be. Part of what I'm really driving at here is that you can write the bestest drum pattern in the world, but then it's how you then use it in the piece of music, and don't be frightened to change it. Like sometimes I've got some really complicated sound on my synth, but to use it in a song is really difficult because it doesn't fit in with the mix very well. And again, the same might happen with the drum pattern. If your drum pattern's really intricate, and you then play this really blarty, loud synth bass over it or something, you won't hear most of the intricacies of the drum pattern. And I actually quite often will just do a simple bass line, simple drum pattern, to then do the bass line with, or at least or whatever the key idea, whether it's the melody or I've had a chord structure idea or whatever. I'll do a simple bass line to record it to, and then actually I'll write a more detailed bass line, and again just to vary it over several bars. Because in this example we're only using 1 bar, but obviously a lot of drum machines you can do 2 bars at a time, and if you've got a song mode, your potential's fairly limitless depending on what the song mode actually entails. And that was one of the things when I first changed to when I got my second drum machine, which was a Korg D1, and it had song mode, and I literally could just change everything from 1 bar to the next. My songwriting thing just exploded, because the machine I had before that, brilliant little piece of kit, little analog thing, Soundmaster Super Sticks. It had a mixer on it for the volume of the sounds. Each had an individual fader for the volume, and so I could drop them in and out, but it was no song mode, no nothing. So basically it just played all the way through the song, and I just occasionally twiddled with it. And so having a song mode really progresses things. Anyway, excuse me, one of the things I was going to mention, and I covered it briefly when I was talking about the 2/4, the bars and so on, is your drum machine may well have potential for doing different numbers of beats in a bar. Different number of steps in a bar, sorry, not beats. I actually do a lot of my music. This is in 16ths, so I've got 16 steps to a 4/4 bar. Nearly all my music I write in 1/32, and what that does is obviously double the number of steps you've got in the same piece of music. So, and where I don't feel it's so important for the drums, but where it really comes into its own is for the bass, and probably the melody line as well, but particularly the bass, just to put that little bit of variation in. I feel the mistake a lot of people make is trying to get everything on the especially with doors, and being very, we're a visual species, and so if it's off the beat, let's just do this. Yeah. Now, if you like that and it sits your piece of music, leave it. But some people will automatically put that back on the right in inverted commas, step 13 if you like, of your 16-step sequence. Put that back to where it should be in inverted commas. But if you like the way it sounds, leave it there. And I find that's particularly important with the bass and the melody line, because the melody line is something that non-musicians in particular will notice much more than whether you've got a drum somewhere. They'll quite often notice if the drum's slightly the snare drum is quite often. Hang on, I'm going to stop that for a second. They'll quite often notice if a snare drum's off, but in general, you can get away with murder. And of course, some music, jazz springs to mind, and reggae to a large degree. The feel is everything, and everything is not on the beat. If you want to sound faster, you bring something slightly forward with the beat. So let's just demonstrate that. So that's not a great example, but that's actually, again, something that a live real drummer would do. Is actually they're slightly ahead of the beat. But what I would suggest is when you're doing this, if you're just really getting into drum programming and things, do that with one of the other pieces of percussion rather than the snare and kick, so that you keep your main timing straight. But go with what it sounds right to you. Right. Just a quick mention while I think of it. On the hi-hat, so this top one here is my open hi-hat. The one below is the closed hi-hat. Just make sure that the open hi-hat is cut off by the closed. It's normally some sort of mute function. It could be called anything on your drum kit, but normally it's something like a mute function. I happen to know they are on this drum kit, and because it will make a difference, and it's, again, sound a bit more like a real drummer. So I hope you could hear the difference there between the where I had the closed muting the open hi-hat. There's a lot longer tail on the hi-hat as it is now, the open hi-hat as it is now. So just pause it, and I'm going to get rid of the closed hi-hat altogether. There is easy ways of doing it, but I find it quite hard to concentrate on doing what I'm doing when I'm trying to talk about what I'm doing. So that tail's going on for almost a beat. So I hope you can, again, that just gave some example of the difference, and that's a fairly good thing to do in terms of just varying your rhythm a bit, or the feel of your rhythm a bit. It's just move where the closed and open hi-hats are together. They don't need to be on the same beat all the time, or same step in your program all the time. So I talked about you having more than 16 steps. Obviously, it gives you a lot more possibilities, but I actually don't really feel it's necessary for drums 90% of the time. I do very occasionally with some of the more interesting percussion, or particularly if I've got sound effects and other things like that going on. They're quite often not on the beat of the bar, because if you've got something that swells slowly, you might well want it to start before the beat is going to be like loudest on, if you like. And again, this is what applies with melody lines in particular, because they quite often swell a bit. You might start them before, but go with what your ears tell you. That's what I'd say on that. So let me switch this back to 16, so I remember. So I've now got 16 steps in the bar again. Right, so make this is just as promised a little bit about the step sequences. It's a bit more like a lot of step sequences certainly used to be, and I don't know if they still are on a lot of modern gear. So to get there, basically your software has to have been updated. I think you have to be 2.13, I think it is, that they first put this feature in, and it's in the new MPC 3 software as well, I know. So on the main screen, out on there, whatever you want to call that little ramp thing, you get this screen. It tells you up here which pad is selected for the moment. In this case, it's A1, which happens to be the kick drum. And I'll talk more about the rest of the screen later, but along the bottom, you've got your 16 steps. So there's nothing playing at the moment. So what I can do is I can just. So that's my 4/4 kick drum again. To pick, there's several ways of picking other sounds. The ones I like to do is I press that. So that's pad select, and you see it stage is illuminated. So I'm now on the snare drum. So it's a very similar pattern to what I did on the other one. Go back to the kick. You see, I've got the timing wrong there again. I hit step 10 instead of 11. There you go. So that's just a quick demonstration. This is obvious. So I'm obviously showing this as the volume. I think if you change that, it will actually change which it is. Oh yeah. So you've got probability. If you've got probability on your machine, definitely worth playing with. I would suggest, a bit like I did with the other ones, so I'm going to stop there, a bit like I did with the previous, is leave the kick and snare alone, at least to start with, until you've got a grip to what it's doing. But essentially what it is obviously if it's 100%, it will play every time. If it's 10%, it should on average play 1 on 10 times. If it's 50%, it should play half the time. Obviously, it's probabilities, so it could be 6 times, or it could be 4 times, or might even do 7 or 8 times. You never know. What I tend to do when I've used probability, and I haven't done it much, I have to say, is I leave the one on the downbeat, step 1. I leave that as 100%, and if I've got a kick drum on step 9, I will leave that at a fairly high probability. It just helps. To be perfectly honest, a lot of the time it's just to help me with my timing when I'm playing along to it. But it's just something that helps keep the groove going a bit more quite often. But everything else, I quite like the snare to drop in and out, so I quite often have that with a higher probability. So I'm just going to change all this. Yeah. So yeah, there's not a lot else to say about this screen, to be honest. Trying to remember what else is it. Yeah, Ratchet. Ratchet again is on a lot of kit these days, and what that is like squeezing extra steps in, extra triggers if you like. So if I had a Ratchet there. Yeah, so that's what a ratchet is. It literally is in effect just squeezing extra hits or extra triggers in. This can be, I actually find this more useful on for bass lines and things like that. But a lot of people use it on the drums, and it's and there's no reason you can't. I don't think there's much else to talk about on that one. Volume we've talked about a lot. Probability we've just done. Ratchet we've just talked about. I think that's in. There's not a lot to say about Ratchet. So if you, other than just like I say, if you've got 16 steps over a bar, so here I've got 8 ratchets. So in that one step of the 16, I've actually got 8 triggers suddenly going, which is why it sounds like a little machine gun almost. I turned it down to 5 and so make it 4. There we go. It still sounds a bit like a machine gun. Make it 2. Then it's like a flam. Yeah. So again, what the ratchet will do in your machine is, I don't know, but have a play with it. It's definitely it can be quite good for doing emphasis or doing little variations. I think the main time I've used it, I've done it on the snare drum, but it's actually quite good on the bass sounds as well. I've discovered actually changing your baseline. On the last song I just completed a few days ago, I actually put ratchet on the bass sound, and it was quite liked it. It just emphasised notes a bit more. It's a bit like the old days of having accent, which is extra volume. Accent's really gone the way of the dodo now because you can adjust volumes usually per step anymore. But accent is really just a boost in volume. And if it was emulating a real drum, it would actually change the pitch slightly and things as well. But really, most drum machines, you're talking about just changing the volume a bit for one step, which you can do anyway all the time. So accent's not so important anymore. So I don't think I've got anything else to mention. I hope you found that useful. The assuming no previous knowledge is really just to avoid skipping things most people go, oh yes, I know that, but one person goes, oh, that's what that means. Well, that's what I'm hoping there was one of those moments for you. That is the point of these videos, and it's what started these videos off was actually being a member of the AE Modular user forum, because it's not as active as it used to be, but somebody will just put a thing on there and you go, oh yeah, that's useful, or oh, I ought to try that, and it sets you off down another avenue. If my videos do any of those things for any of you, I'll be over the moon. Thank you.